They said I was nobody at work. The word echoed in my ears as I stood in that glass-walled conference room, 20 pairs of eyes boring into me with a mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment. Richard Cross, Vice President of Operations, leaned back in his leather chair with that smug smile I'd learned to hate over the past 6 months. "Let's be honest," he said, gesturing dismissively in my direction. "Sarah here is nobody. Any secretary off the street could do what she does. Hell, my intern could probably do it better." Clients from Goldman Sachs shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My face burned hot, but I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded neatly on the mahogany table. What Richard didn't know, what nobody in that room except me knew, was that the nobody standing before them was married to Alexander Harrington, the CEO of Harrington and Associates. And in exactly 47 minutes, his entire world was about to collapse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this story really began. My name is Sarah Mitchell, or rather Sarah Mitchell Harrington, though I'd kept my maiden name at work. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 6 years I'd been the senior executive assistant at one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms. Every morning I woke up at 5:30 a.m. in our Upper East Side penthouse, kissed my sleeping husband goodbye, and took the subway to work like everyone else. Alexander and I had agreed when we married 2 years ago that our relationship would remain private. Not because he was ashamed, far from it, but because I insisted. "I need to prove myself on my own merits," I told him on our honeymoon in Santorini, watching the sunset paint the white buildings golden. "If people know I'm married to you, every achievement will be questioned. Every promotion will be called nepotism." Alexander had traced his finger along my jawline, his green eyes searching mine. "You don't have anything to prove, Sarah. You're brilliant. To you, maybe. But not to them." He'd kissed my forehead and agreed, though I could see the reluctance in his expression. My husband was a protector by nature, and asking him to stand back while I navigated the corporate battlefield alone went against every instinct he had. For 2 years it worked beautifully. I excelled at my job, managing complex schedules, coordinating multi-million-dollar deals, and becoming the invisible force that kept our executive team running smoothly. I arrived early, left late, and never complained. I was efficient, professional, and according to my annual reviews, indispensable. Then Richard Cross was hired. He'd come from a rival firm with an impressive resume and an even more impressive ego. 42 years old, divorced twice, with the kind of slicked-back hair and expensive suits that screamed Wall Street stereotype. From day one, he treated support staff like we were interchangeable furniture. He'd snap his fingers at assistants, bark orders without saying please or thank you, and had a particular disdain for women he deemed beneath his station. I was firmly in that category. "Mitchell, coffee. Now." That was how he greeted me most mornings, not even looking up from his phone as he strode past my desk. "Good morning, Mr. Cross. How do you take it?" "Black. And don't take all day." I'd grit my teeth and comply, reminding myself that this was temporary. That Alexander and I would eventually go public, and then what? Would I want people to respect me only because of who I married? The thought made my stomach turn. 3 months after Richard's arrival, Jessica Cole joined as the new director of human resources. She was 35, strikingly beautiful with sharp cheekbones and sharper ambitions. Within weeks, I noticed her spending an unusual amount of time in Richard's office, the door closed, their laughter echoing through the halls. Then the sabotage began. Started small. A meeting I'd scheduled for Alexander would mysteriously disappear from his calendar. Documents I'd prepared would vanish from the shared drive. Coffee orders I'd placed would arrive wrong, and Richard would publicly berate me for the mistake in front of the entire office. "Is this really that complicated, Mitchell?" I asked for black coffee. "This has cream in it." "Are you incompetent or just not paying attention?" My colleague Jennifer would shoot me sympathetic looks from her desk, but no one dared speak up. Richard had made it clear that loyalty to him was rewarded, and dissent was crushed. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late September. I'd been working for 3 weeks on a comprehensive presentation for the Goldman Sachs pitch, a potential $50 million client. I compiled all the data, created the slides, and coordinated with 5 different departments. It was exactly the kind of high-level work I'd been hoping would lead to a promotion. The morning of the presentation, I arrived to find Richard standing at the head of the conference table, presenting my work as his own. Every slide, every data point, every strategic recommendation, all credited to the Richard Cross team. I stood in the doorway, frozen with disbelief. "Ah, Mitchell," Richard said, noticing me. "Perfect timing. We need more coffee for our guests." That's when James Harrison from Goldman Sachs spoke up. "Actually, wasn't this presentation prepared by Ms. Mitchell? I thought I saw her name on the original file." Richard's smile didn't waver. "Sarah's a great assistant. She helped compile some of the data. But the strategic thinking, the analysis, that's all my team's work." He glanced at me. "The coffee, Mitchell?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab those slides and show the timestamps, the edit history, the emails proving every word was mine. Instead, I nodded and walked out. In the break room, I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. Jennifer appeared beside me. "Sarah, that was your presentation." "I know." "You should say something. Go to HR." I let out a bitter laugh. "Jessica? She's in Richard's pocket." "Then go to your manager. Hell, go to the CEO." I looked at her, and for a moment I almost told her. Almost revealed that I could walk into the CEO's office anytime I wanted, that I shared his bed every night, that one word from me would end Richard's career. But I swallowed it down. "I'll handle it." That evening, I sat at our dining room table, my laptop open, and began documenting everything. Every stolen project. Every public humiliation. Every suspicious transaction I'd noticed in Richard's expense reports. Alexander came home to find me surrounded by papers and screenshots. "Sarah, what's all this?" I looked up at my husband. "I need your help. But not as the CEO. As someone who understands corporate fraud." His expression shifted from concern to something sharper. "Talk to me." I told him everything. Not just about the bullying, but about the irregularities I'd noticed. Large transfers to offshore accounts. Expense reports that didn't match reality. The meetings with competitors that weren't on any official calendar. "He's stealing," I said flatly. "And Jessica's covering for him." Alexander's jaw tightened. "How long has this been going on?" "Months. Maybe longer. But I couldn't prove anything until recently." I turned my laptop toward him, showing a spreadsheet I'd built tracking suspicious transactions. "Look at this. $7 million moved through dummy accounts over the past 18 months. He studied the screen, and I watched the CEO emerge, the sharp, analytical mind that had built Harrington and Associates into an empire. "This is enough to start a formal investigation." "No." I closed the laptop. "If you start an investigation, everyone will know it came from me. And they'll assume it's because of our relationship. I need to do this my way." "Sarah, please." I took his hands. "Trust me. I have a plan. I just need a little more time." He didn't like it. I could see the protective instinct warring with respect for my autonomy. Finally, he nodded. 1 week. But if he crosses another line, I'm stepping in, marriage secret or not. Kissed him. 1 week. Over the next 5 days, I became a ghost. I did my job with robotic efficiency, speaking only when spoken to, keeping my head down. But every moment Richard or Jessica thought I wasn't paying attention, I was recording. Not secretly, I'd position my phone openly on my desk, recording notes for my own reference. New York was a one-party consent state. I only needed my own permission. I captured Richard bragging to Jessica about his offshore accounts. Jessica discussing how to manage out employees who asked too many questions. Richard on a call with a competitor, clearly sharing privileged client information. But I needed something bigger. I needed them to hang themselves so publicly that even they couldn't deny it. The opportunity came on Friday. Richard called an emergency board meeting, claiming there had been a catastrophic error in the Goldman Sachs account that cost the firm the $50 million deal. He'd submitted a formal complaint to Jessica recommending my immediate termination. Jennifer texted me the news. "He's saying you sent the wrong contracts. That you cost us the Goldman account. Emergency board meeting at 2 p.m. I'm so sorry, Sarah." My hands trembled as I read the message, but not from fear. From anticipation. At 1:45 p.m., I walked into the executive conference room on the 20th floor. The entire board of directors was assembled. 12 senior partners, Jessica, Richard, and an empty chair at the head of the table where Alexander usually sat. He was delayed, according to his assistant, which I knew meant he was watching on the secure video feed from his office. Richard's eyes lit up when he saw me. "Thank you for joining us, Mitchell. Please have a seat." I sat in the chair facing the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, my leather portfolio in front of me. Robert Chen, one of the senior partners, cleared his throat. "Ms. Mitchell, we've asked you here regarding a serious matter. Mr. Cross has submitted evidence suggesting your negligence cost this firm a major client." "I understand, Mr. Chen." Richard leaned forward, his expression grave with fake concern. "Sarah, I know you've been under a lot of stress lately. We all make mistakes. But this was a $50 million mistake." He slid a folder across the table. "These are the contracts you sent to Goldman Sachs. The terms were completely wrong. Unacceptable terms that made us look incompetent." I opened the folder, examining the documents. They were indeed incorrect, and they also weren't the ones I'd sent. The metadata had been altered, but not carefully enough. "These aren't my documents," I said calmly. Jessica spoke up, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sarah, your name is right there in the file properties. I know this is difficult to accept, but the file properties show my name because these were created by copying my original documents and modifying them. Badly." I looked at Richard. "The metadata shows the last edit was made yesterday at 11:47 p.m. I was at home, but I'm guessing the server logs will show someone accessed my computer remotely using admin credentials." I turned to Jessica. "Credentials only IT and HR have access to." The room went quiet. Richard recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "This is ridiculous. You're making wild accusations because you can't accept responsibility for your mistake." "I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts." I opened my portfolio and pulled out a thick folder. "I have here the original contracts I sent to Goldman Sachs with confirmed delivery receipts and their response, which was positive. They didn't reject our proposal because of the terms. They rejected it because 3 days later, someone from this firm contacted them and tried to sell them proprietary information about our other clients. Someone who wanted them to switch to a different firm." I slid a printed email across the table. It was from Richard's personal email to a contact at Goldman Sachs, offering client lists in exchange for a substantial finder's fee. Color drained from Richard's face. "Where did you get that?" "That's my private, you can't." "I didn't hack anything. You forwarded it to your work email by accident last Tuesday. It's been sitting in the company server ever since." I looked at Jessica. "Along with several interesting conversations between you and Mr. Cross about how to handle the Mitchell problem." Jessica's composed mask cracked. "This is harassment. You can't record people without their consent. Actually, in New York I can. It's a one-party consent state. And I'm the party that consented." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "Would you like to hear the recordings? There are several good ones. My personal favorite is from Wednesday when you discussed how much you'd both profit from the client information sales." Richard shot to his feet. This is insane. She's lying. She's fabricating evidence because she's about to be fired and she's desperate. Then you won't mind if we bring in forensic accountants to examine your offshore accounts? I opened my portfolio again and removed another document. Because I have statements here showing $8.7 million moved out of company accounts into dummy corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. All authorized with your electronic signature. That's enough. Jessica stood as well. This entire ambush is inappropriate. We came here to discuss Ms. Mitchell's termination, and instead she's throwing around conspiracy theories. I move that we end this meeting and have security escort her. No one is escorting anyone. The voice came from the doorway. Alexander Harrington stood there, his 6'2" frame filling the entrance. Behind him were two people I recognized as the firm's head of legal and chief compliance officer. Behind them were two other men in dark suits, FBI, judging by the badges clipped to their belts. Richard's face went from red to white. Mr. Harrington. Sir. I can explain. You can explain to them. Alexander gestured to the FBI agents. Agent Morrison, Agent Chin, I believe you have some questions for Mr. Cross and Ms. Cole? The room erupted in chaos. Jessica lunged for her briefcase, but Agent Morrison was faster, positioning himself between her and the exit. Richard tried a different tactic, pointing at me. She's your assistant. She's been feeding you lies because we were about to fire her. Alexander's expression didn't change. Actually, she's my wife. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood, meeting the shocked stares of the board members. My name is Sarah Mitchell Harrington. I've kept my maiden name and my marriage private for the past 2 years because I wanted to build my career on merit, not connections. Everything I've presented today I gathered on my own, through my own work, watching these two people systematically steal from this company and abuse its employees. Robert Chen found his voice first. You're married to our CEO? For 2 years. And before anyone asks, he has had zero involvement in my career trajectory here. He didn't know about this investigation until 4 days ago. Everything you've seen today is my work. Agent Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Cross, Ms. Cole, we have warrants for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of trade secrets. You have the right to remain silent. I tuned out the Miranda rights, watching as Richard's face contorted through denial, rage, and finally defeat. Jessica tried one last time. This is entrapment. She set us up. I met her eyes. No. You set yourselves up. I just documented it. As the FBI agents led them out in handcuffs, Richard stopped in front of me. You're nobody, he hissed. You'll always be nobody. I smiled, and it was genuine. Actually, I'm the person who just took down a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. I'd say that makes me somebody. After they were gone, the board members sat in stunned silence. Alexander moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. Gentlemen, he addressed the board, I'm aware this is highly irregular. I'm also aware that for the past 2 years, my wife has performed her duties with exceptional skill while enduring harassment and discrimination. I've asked our chief compliance officer to conduct a full review of how this situation was allowed to escalate. We will be implementing new policies to ensure this never happens again. He paused, his voice softening slightly. But right now, I'd like to introduce you properly to Sarah Mitchell Harrington, who as of this moment, is our new Vice President of Strategic Operations. My head whipped toward him. What? The position just opened up, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. Unless you prefer to keep being an assistant? The board members, recovering from their shock, actually smiled. Robert Chin spoke first. Given what we've just witnessed, I think Ms. Mitchell Harrington has more than proven she's qualified for the role. I second the appointment. The vote was unanimous. 2 hours later, I stood in what was formerly Richard's office, now mine. The Manhattan skyline stretched out before me, the evening sun painting the glass towers gold. Alexander came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "How do you feel?" I leaned back against him, watching the city that had tried to break me. "Like somebody." He kissed the top of my head. "You always were." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The FBI's investigation revealed that Richard's theft was even more extensive than I documented, over $12 million when all accounts were traced. Jessica faced additional charges for destroying evidence and witness tampering. The trial made national news. Executive assistant takes down white-collar crime ring. I hated the media attention, but I understood its value. Within days, I was contacted by dozens of young women in similar positions, asking for advice on how to handle workplace abuse and discrimination. That's when I knew what I needed to do. 6 months after Richard's arrest, I stood in the same conference room where he'd called me nobody. But this time it was filled with 50 junior employees, assistants, associates, coordinators. People who kept companies running but rarely received recognition. "My name is Sarah Mitchell Harrington," I began, "and 6 months ago I was sitting where you are. I was invisible, undervalued, and told daily that I was replaceable." I paused, making eye contact with a young woman in the front row who looked terrified. But here's what I learned. The people who tell you you're nobody are usually the ones most afraid of your potential. I shared my story, not the sanitized version but the real one. The humiliation, the stolen work, the moments I'd wanted to quit. And then the decision to fight back with documentation, patience, and strategic thinking. "You don't need to be married to the CEO to have power," I told them. "You need to be excellent at what you do, document everything, and never let anyone convince you that your work doesn't matter. 'Cause it does. You matter." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young man approached me. "Ms. Harrington, I'm going through something similar with my manager. He takes credit for my work constantly. But I'm afraid if I speak up, I'll lose my job." I handed him my card. "Email me. I've set up a mentorship program specifically for situations like yours. We'll get you the support and resources you need." His eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." I felt so alone. "You're not alone. None of you are." 1 year after that conference room confrontation, I received a call from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Richard Cross had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Jessica Cole received 12 years and had her professional licenses permanently revoked. The judge cited the callous disregard for both the law and basic human decency. I felt no joy in their suffering, but I did feel something else: closure. That evening, Alexander and I hosted a small dinner party at our penthouse. Jennifer was there, along with several other colleagues who'd supported me. Robert Chen attended, as did the head of legal who'd helped build the case against Richard and Jessica. "A toast," Alexander raised his glass, "to my extraordinary wife who taught this company what real leadership looks like." "Hear, hear," the group chorused. I smiled but raised my own glass. "To everyone who stays quiet when they witness injustice. May we all find the courage to speak up. And to everyone who's ever been called nobody, you are somebody. You always were." 2 years later, I sat in my corner office, 3 times the size of Richard's old space, reviewing quarterly reports. Company had not only recovered from the scandal but thrived. Our new workplace culture policies were featured in the Harvard Business Review as a model for corporate ethics. My phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. "Lunch? I miss my wife." I smiled. Even after 4 years of marriage, he still made my heart skip. "Your office or mine?" I texted back. "Yours. I like the view better." 20 minutes later, he arrived with sushi from my favorite place in Tribeca. We ate at the small table by my window, looking out at the city. "I got an interesting call today," he said between bites. "Fortune magazine wants to do a profile on us. The CEO and VP power couple who took down corporate fraud from the inside." I made a face. Do we have to? We don't have to do anything. But think about the message it sends. That it's possible to have integrity and success. That speaking up against abuse works. That nobody stays nobody forever. I considered it. Only if we can talk about the mentorship program and the policy changes. I don't want it to be a puff piece about corporate romance. Deal. He reached across the table, taking my hand. You know what today is? Thursday. It's 2 years exactly since you put me on speakerphone in that board meeting. I laughed. Was that really only 2 years ago? It feels like a lifetime. It was a lifetime. Your old life ended. Your real one began. Our real life, I corrected. He brought my hand to his lips. Our real life. That evening, I stood at my office window after everyone had gone home. The sun was setting behind the Hudson River, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I thought about that terrified woman who'd stood in a conference room being called nobody. I thought about all the nights I'd cried in frustration, all the times I'd wanted to quit. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I'd started recording messages to myself, a habit I'd developed during the darkest days, a way to remind myself that I was fighting for something bigger than revenge. Note to self, I said softly. If you're listening to this, you made it. Person who tried to break you is in prison. Person who tried to silence you lost her career. And you? You're standing in your corner office at the company you helped save, married to the man you love, leading a team of 50 people and mentoring hundreds more. I paused, watching the city lights begin to flicker on across Manhattan. But here's what matters most. You didn't become them. You stayed kind. You stayed ethical. You proved that you don't have to be cruel to be powerful. And every single day you're helping other people find their voice. I ended the recording and smiled at my reflection in the darkened window. The girl who'd been called nobody was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that power isn't given, it's taken. Not through cruelty or manipulation, but through competence, courage, and an absolute refusal to accept anyone else's definition of your worth. My phone buzzed. A notification from our mentorship program's message board. A young woman had just posted, "Today I reported my abusive manager." I was scared, but I remembered what Ms. Harrington said. Document everything and never accept being treated as nobody. TAR is investigating. Thank you for giving me courage. I typed a quick response. You gave yourself courage. I just reminded you it was always there. Proud of you. As I gathered my things to go home, I took one last look at the office that had once belonged to the man who tried to destroy me. My degrees hung on the wall, a new MBA I'd earned while working full-time. Photos of Alexander and me at various charity events. A framed copy of the Harvard Business Review article about our workplace reforms. And in the center of my desk, a small plaque that a colleague had given me as a joke that I'd kept because it was perfect. It read, "Nobody? I prefer somebody who took down a criminal enterprise before lunch." I turned off the lights and headed home to my husband, my real life, my hard-won peace. They'd called me nobody. And I'd proven that nobody could become anybody if they refused to stay silent, refused to accept abuse, and refused to let other people's cruelty define their worth. I didn't just survive. I won. And I did it on my own terms.